Hey everyone, Jonathan North here, and welcome to a special bonus episode of the I Heart Podcast, an interview I did this week for the Rotoscopers with Howard Jones, co-founder of Axis VFX, who has worked on several animated films for one of my favorite studios, Aardman Animation. As most of you know, I am a writer for Rotoscopers.com, an animation news and reviews website, and occasionally we are given opportunities to interview people involved in the animation industry, whether it be filmmakers, voice actors, artists, etc. I have tried to schedule these interviews once or twice before, but something always seems to come up, and now that I'm working overnight full-time, I basically have given up on even trying to do any interviews. However, in January, I saw one come up that sounded really interesting. Someone representing Howard Jones was reaching out to see if anyone would be interested in interviewing him, as Aardman's latest film, Early Man, for which Howard had worked as a visual effects supervisor, had just been nominated for 7 Annie Awards. I really liked that movie, and I thought it would be a cool opportunity, but I didn't even bother volunteering for it because I figured it wouldn't work out. Then a month or so later, they reached out again, checking one more time to see if anyone was interested. Since no one had taken it in the past month, I decided to volunteer as long as we could work it out with my crazy schedule. And it took a while to find a day that would work for both of us, but this week we finally got it figured out, and the result was this interview. Originally, I offered the audio of this interview to Morgan, the Rotoscopers editor-in-chief, since the interview was for her website, but as their main podcast is currently on hiatus, she told me I could just use it here and then link to it within the article on the website. That way readers would have a way to listen to the interview should they choose to do so. If any of my regular listeners would like to read the article version of this interview, or check out any of my other writing for Rotoscopers.com, I'll have a link to that in the description of this episode. And now, without further ado, here's my interview with Howard Jones for the Rotoscopers.
Hello?
Hello?
Oh, hi, is that Jonathan?
Hey, hello. How are you?
I'm alright, you?
Good.
So, what would you like to start with?
Well, I was thinking, since you're probably not as familiar to some of our readers as somebody like Nick Park, I was wondering if you could just tell us a bit about you and what you do.
Yeah, sure. I'm Howard Jones. I'm a co-founder of Axis VFX, which is part of the Axis Studios group. I've been working in post-production for, must be coming on 27 years now. And I've been working in visual effects for about 21 years. Most of my time now, apart from running the company, is as a visual effects supervisor. And on Early Man, I was a visual effects supervisor across the 3D and 2D teams, working directly with Nick Park to get his ideas on screen.
So how did you get into this field?
So I got into visual effects in '98, having worked at Avid. I went in as an editor, and I came out training people up on their visual effects software, which was Avid Illusion. And then, I got my first job because my boss at Avid told me what a wonderful career I was going to have looking after resellers. So I went straight back to my office, phoned up the BBC in Bristol, and asked if they had a job. And I just happened to know I'd sold something to them. So I got a job with BBC in '98 down in Bristol, and that's where I've stayed ever since.
So how did you get started working with Aardman? Myself
and my business partner Grant, we met working on Pirates, which was Peter Law's film. It was America, Pirates Band of Misfits.
Mm-hmm.
And for the few years after we'd worked there, we kept giving each other work from our respective businesses, and we're trying to set up a company. And then Sean 1 came out, or was coming out, and I approached Aardman, basically, having been a supervisor on a short that they'd done, and just said, if we get a company going, could you consider us to do the visual effects for your next film? And we got a company, we got the budget right, and we got the job. So that's how Axis VFX got there. But my first job was working for Pirates.
So have you done any other animated films other than with Aardman?
So I'm just trying to check in my mind. I think the answer is no.
Okay.
We've only worked with Aardman.
Okay.
We've done Sean Early Man, and we're doing Sean 2 at the moment.
Mm-hmm. So can you tell us about the development of the movie? Like, were you involved in any of the ideas or anything about like pre-production or anything, or were you just in charge of bringing the ideas to life?
Mostly bringing the ideas to life. In the early days, Nick was very much heads down with script writing and storyboarding and story development and the filming side of things. But as that eased off, then his attention was able to give more attention to the visual effects side. But it's mostly, to be honest, getting into his head and realizing what his vision is and trying to realize that as close as we can. Obviously, we go through a number of iterations, and sometimes, I might offer something up that's a bit of a blind alley, but at least we know that's the way we don't want to go. So it's sort of, it's mostly getting his ideas on screen.
So do you do mostly like computer-generated special effects? And can you tell us a bit about the process of doing that on top of stop motion and how you integrate those two things?
Yeah, I mean, everything we added to the film was computer generated in some form or was computer manipulation. The simplest stuff we do is to remove rigs and clean up any puncture wounds on the clay, or sometimes you get knife marks left behind, which are a bit unsightly. So we clean up to a certain extent the actual faces and everything, but we still keep as much of the fingerprints and all the actual natural attributes that comes with the claymation. So that's the basic stuff, clean up and then rig removal. Then on Early Man and Sean too, there's a substantial amount of skies to be added or extending the set. Now, they were all done by Aardman as matte paintings. But our role was to sort of integrate them into the backgrounds of the shots themselves, and also just make sense for continuity as well. There was also some things like the geysers and fire, and at the beginning there was a lot of fire and smoke and other stuff that was added. Mm-hmm. A lot of the fire was CG, very little of it is library, but with the CG fire and everything and all the torches, our goal was to make it feel as part of the Aardman world. Our initial tests were too oily and looked too much. I mean, in fact, the very initial test we got from the effects artist, I said, it's great, but it looks like a helicopter on fire. We need something a bit more suitable to the size of the torch that they're carrying. And then it still came through too oily. So we simplified the look of it to try and make it feel part of Aardman's world. So there's torches everywhere. There's sort of backgrounds and skies and everything. And then obviously the major thing that we did was the stadium and the audience. So the stadium had already been designed and was passed on to us. What we did was optimize it, make it renderable. We built all the grass and everything else in the stadium, and we turned it into an asset that we could actually use for the actual film. We then worked with Dave Alex, who was the DOP on it, Dave Alex with it, and he came in and helped us light the stadium. So it was lit in a way that he would have done it if he could light the stadium. Once that was all set up, we developed the crowd system. So we were able to put in 20,000 puppets into the seats. The puppets were designed and built by Aardman, and the basic animation types came from Aardman, but we've spent quite a few months putting together different animation cycles and different percentages of different animation cycles so that we got a natural feel to the audience. Mm-hmm. So there wasn't too much visual noise and stuff. And if they were cheering, it felt like they were all cheering, but as individuals rather than as a sort of a robotic clone crowd. And then once we got that, it was a question of working with Nick. He gave us what they call a lab, which is a live action video of what he wanted the crowd to do at any particular point. So he gave us a general mood of the crowd. And then my role was to sort of interpret that along with the different cycles that we created to get the right feel for the crowd at the right time in the story. I think that's probably most of what we did. It took about a year and a half. It's a lot less time to explain it.
Yeah, I can imagine. The crowds would have been pretty much impossible to do if you had to do them by hand, the way they do the rest of the characters.
Yeah, they had a couple of scenes where they had it was an early test and an early shot in scene 60 when we first go into the stadium, and they got I think 2 rows or 3 rows of crowd. I think it was 3, and then the rest is CG crowd behind them, and which is tough because you've got to get your CG to fit into their CG and look like it's part of the extension of the colours and everything, as well as the quality. And I think they just realised even that 3 rows was a lot of animation time. So that's why most of the crowd is 3D.
So in all of what you did for the movie, what was your favorite thing to work on?
Well, I did the opening shot, so that was my favourite bit.
Okay.
But no, I think, to be honest, it was the getting the crowds to work and getting all of that to work. I think because that's my background originally was an editor, and there's a lot of thought going into making sure that the crowd cuts as it should do across the shots. And I think, again, from a supervising point of view, what is always satisfying is if you can take someone who's started something that looks good, is to turn it from looking good to looking great.
So I was told that Wallace and Gromit have cameos in the movie.
Yes, they do. Yeah, I just happened to be in the viewing theatre when they showed it to Nick. It's a shot where the Queen arrives, and it's a wide shot. And so they're in that one. But there was also the penguin from The Wrong Trousers, and that's in a wide shot of the village as we fly over, where the duck appears at the top of frame. So there's 3 cameos in there.
Okay. I will have to go back and re-watch that because I don't remember seeing those. I was surprised when I was told that they were in there. Like they must have hid them really well.
Well, yeah. So it's a wide shot. The Queen gets off the mammoth and walks over to Lord Nuth, and they're in the bottom of frame. But you'll have to look hard to see Wallace.
Mm-hmm.
With the other one, the penguin, you'll really have to look, but he's on the right-hand side of the screen. But you have to know where to look, particularly if you're not seeing it on the big screen, because he is very small.
Okay. So when your representative initially reached out to us, she was telling us that Early Man had been nominated for 7 Annie Awards, which I know has now passed, and there was a paid competition this year.
We came joint second in all of them.
Yeah, there was so many good animated films last year.
Oh, it's Spider-Man.
Kind of disappointing that not everybody could win. But I did find that you won 1 award in the British Independent Film Awards, which is not an award that I was familiar with, probably because I'm American. But it looked as though you particularly had won this award. So can you tell us a little bit about that and maybe about the award too for people like me who don't know what the award is?
Yeah, the other one we just won as well a couple of weeks ago was a Royal Television Society Award, which is I find slightly odd because it isn't anything to do with television, but they had a visual effects in any category, which we got for, but that's more of a local one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the British Independent Film Awards, I think it's been going 14 plus years, and it's from the same founders as the Sundance Festival.
Okay.
So they set it up in the UK, obviously to support independent film rather than the mainstream studios. I must admit, I don't know much more than that, apart from it's quite a good night. I mean, it's a pre-Oscar one, and the film that won, what was the film that won loads of Oscars? Best Actress with Olivia Colman. The one about the Queen.
I think I know what you're talking about, but I don't know that I saw that one. I can't remember what it's called.
No. Yeah, so that one, a lot of stuff. But being an Actors Award ceremony with the craft being a bit separate, we found out before the event that we'd won.
So was there a ceremony that did you go up on stage and receive the award?
No, they again, so because we're craft and not one of the actors and all the rest of it, we just got ours in advance, and then we got told in advance, then they announced all the craft in one go, and then we just went off and got our awards and a free bag of makeup, which is always good for the other partner.
It's like this award's like what the ones that they cut out of the Oscar ceremony, the ones that don't get on television, I guess.
Yeah, it's that sort of thing. But no, it's quite a big event. I mean, I must admit I didn't know much about it, but I was surprised actually how big an event it was. Quite a lot of famous people going to it, British famous people, some of whom you would have heard of.
Well, congratulations on winning that. I was really surprised when I was looking to see what awards it had won. I was like, wait a minute, I think he specifically won this one. So I thought that was really interesting and cool.
Yeah, well, it was for the visual effects supervisors, so that's for that. But obviously, it's part of the team and all that, getting it together. But it's a bit like being a conductor of an orchestra.
Yeah.
I it's about the closest analogy I can think of, or a director of a film, really, but on a different level.
Well, I know that this particular interview is mainly about Early Man, but last week we got our first official look at the sequel to Shaun the Sheep, and it sounds like you're working on that. Is there anything you can talk about with regards to that film? Not like getting into spoiler territory or anything, but is there anything that you're allowed to talk about with that movie?
I mean, obviously, everyone now knows there's an alien in it. I think the key thing for me is that we've gone a lot more filmic with the whole look of it. The style is sort of looking at classic sci-fi films from the 80s and 90s. So there's quite a bit of influence from those films, but it's a much more filmic experience, I think. Plus, a really good solid story with the usual amount of jokes. I can't really say much more than that, to be honest. But it's fun to work on because it's not just doing Shaun the Sheep 1 again. It's definitely moved on, and that's the same for everybody. The DOP, the Aardman themselves. They've made it into a different film.
Yeah, I was excited when I heard what the premise was going to be. I knew that in the TV show Shaun the Sheep, the little shorts they've done, that they've had aliens before. I know there was some people saying like, "What? Why is Shaun the Sheep going sci-fi?" I was like, "This is not new territory for them. They've done this before. They're just expanding it with a new story," which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, and I know talking to Golly, who directed the first one at the premiere, I don't know, 4 years ago. And he just said, "Oh yeah, I'm going to do Shaun the Sheep too." And I said, "Great." He says, "It's going to have aliens in it." And I thought he was joking. And then like 3 years later, it's like, "Oh, there's going to be aliens in it." So.
Yeah, I'm excited for this one. It's kind of hard to tell when I'll get to see it because who knows with the American release schedule. We don't always get the British movies at the same time. But
to be honest, we don't know when it is yet. I don't think there's been an official release date unless they say it on the trailer.
Well, I'm hoping that we'll get it a little sooner than we got the first one, because I know it was months after the UK release that it came to America, and then it was really hard to find a theater that was showing it. It didn't get the Shaun the Sheep movie didn't get a very good release in America. They did better with Early Man, but it was hard to find the first Shaun the Sheep movie.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it was Lionsgate, was it? That released it in America. Yeah. Because I guess they decide what kind of release they're going to put it out for.
Mm-hmm.
So it did do very well, I think, overall. I think it took over 100 million, I think.
Yeah, I was glad that it did well overall because I love Aardman, and I really wanted more Shaun the Sheep. I think it's a lot of people's favorite Aardman characters beyond Wallace and Gromit. Everybody loves Shaun the Sheep. Yeah,
and of course Shaun came out of a Wallace and Gromit short as well, didn't it?
Yes, he did.
Yeah. No, it is a good film. I'm really pleased to be working on it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's all my questions for now. I don't want to keep you too long. So, I guess, do you have any social media or anything that you want to plug for anyone who wants to find you online and follow you?
Let me just see. We've got a Vimeo account, which is for the whole group, which I think is Axis Animation. There's an Axis Animation, and I think there's an Axis VFX.
Okay.
Website video thing which shows stuff that we're doing, and obviously we've got axis-vfx.com is our website, which would be good to plug.
And I'll have links to all those for anybody who wants to look you guys up. Okay, well, thank you for doing this interview. This was fun.
Thank you.
Talking to you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you have a good rest of the day.
And you. Take care.
Like I said before the interview, you can find the written version of this discussion at rotoscopers.com, where you can also find out more information about Howard, images from his work on Early Man with Aardman, as well as links to his website and various social media. In the next official episode of the iHeart podcast, my friend Eli Sanza, who incidentally also writes for the Rotoscopers from time to time, will be joining me for the iHeart Awards, a made-up entertainment award show consisting only of categories that I care about. We'll see you next time.